Today, joining us on the Social Studies show is Tony Weaver Jr. He is a writer and entrepreneur creating diverse stories that make young people feel seen and valued. In 2014, following the events of Ferguson, Tony embarked on a journey to create new media narratives for minorities that would challenge the status quo. What started as a school project at Elon University became a national platform. It's landed him on the TEDx stage in the presence of world leaders and gained him recognition from the likes of Lebron James, Taraji P, Henson, Lena Waithe. At the age of 25, he is the CEO of Weird Enough Productions, where he channels a lifelong love of comics and anime into diverse media content like the award-winning comic series, The Uncommons. Tony has been honored as a history shaker by Coca Cola, a barrier breaker by Marriott International, and received the Generation Titan Prize from Google. His work has been featured by NBC, Forbes 30 Under 30, the Huffington Post, Inc. Magazine, HelloBeautiful, EdSurge, and Quartz. He shared his message at South by Southwest, Columbia University, and San Diego Comic-Con. Being open and vulnerable about his childhood experiences, Tony hopes to help everyone find the hero inside. Thank you for joining us on the Social Studies show.
The weird thing is that, like, whenever I hear my bio, my brain's like, who did that? That person sounds so cool. Who? Wow, that person sounds nice. And then I remember it's me and I'm like, I did do those things,
I have the same problem.
It's like, sometimes you spend so much time working and trying to do the right thing that when you stop and look back, you're like, wow, I've been so focused on what I've been trying to accomplish from a like goal perspective that sometimes I don't sit back and think like, wow, you did that. That's nice.
No, you've done a lot of amazing things. And I mean, that's why you're here. And to be completely honest, we're just going to jump right into it, because one thing that really struck me at home was you talking about being a mentor to a fourth grade student, Nazir, and how he had a lack of superheroes growing up. And a particular story jumped out at me of you were saying how for Halloween he was going to go dressed up and he couldn't figure out what to wear, so he was going to go as CJ from Grand Theft Auto because that's what I identified with. And I wanted you to take us a little bit through that story because it's just interesting to hear how a child sees himself in representation of comics and heroes.
Yeah, I think Nazir's story is one that's really important to me because it exemplifies something that a lot of young students, especially young students of color, are dealing with in the context that they are looking for places where they can feel represented. They're looking for places where they can see people that look like them, and they don't find them. But when they don't find them, their thought isn't, oh, there needs to be stories for people like me. Instead, their thought becomes, oh, there's something wrong with me. Because very clearly I'm looking around and I don't see anybody else like me. Therefore, we get two options. Either there's something wrong with me, or I need to go be like this other person that I see.
Get stereotyped.
Yeah, so the fork in the road becomes, do I acknowledge that who I am as an individual is one that is just incompatible with what the world deems as acceptable, or do I shift myself and alter myself to become this person that isn't who I'd be on my own accord, but it's who I feel like I'm being pressured to be. And Nazir is a student that I often bring up, but we've worked with schools around the country, and I am often devastated by some of the things that I hear from the students that we work with. I had the opportunity to work with a group of students in New York, and I spoke with them for about half an hour, and it was very clear that they were excited, they were listening. One thing that I hear a lot from teachers when we work with students is you can tell they like you because they don't talk when you're talking. They might not ask questions, but if you look out and you notice that all of them are looking at you and that they're paying attention, it means they like you. Because sometimes I can't even get them to do that for me, and I'm their teacher. So these students are watching me talk for 30 minutes, and when we get to the end, I ask if anybody has any questions. No one has questions, and I'm thinking, don't be nervous. And most of the time when I go places, I wear a cape. I'm like, don't be nervous. I literally have a cape on. If there's anybody here that'll look foolish, it's probably me. And one student raises his hand, and I'm thinking, okay, he seemed to be really excited about the comic stuff. He's going to ask me what my favorite comic is or what anime I'm watching right now. I love talking with kids about what animes they're watching. And he says, since I'm not smart enough to go to college, do you think I should work at McDonald's or join the military? Which do you think would be easier? And it really blew me away because it was very clear that he was engaged and excited about what I was talking about. But he's in the 7th grade. Who told you that you weren't smart enough for college in the 7th grade? Like, if in the 7th grade you determine that those are your career outcomes and those are your career possibilities, what does that say about the way that you feel about yourself and the images that you're seeing of what your potential is?
And so that just kind of ties in with what we're talking about as far as the systematic alienation of multicultural kids seeing things in the media that they can identify.
I think people really underestimate how important it is for students of color to be able to look at people that look like them demonstrating what their potential is, showing them that they have the capability to aim for great things. Because when those images aren't there, the effects that it has on their personal development are devastating to the point that they limit their possibilities and what they can do with their life at such a young age.
And on the negative side of that, something like if you're not even looking at McDonald's, the army, or finding your place or space in this world, it can lead you down a darker path. And I know you had talked about that with some of your discussion about how you had actually had a suicide attempt and alienation and stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that and what brought you out of that hole of, wanting to take your own life and then finding a path past that and helping getting through that.
Yeah, like I said, we get two paths. We either decide, okay, my existence is one that doesn't have value, or I'm going to go and become this other person. And for me, at first, what I tried to do was go and become this other person. Okay. So you remember when Yahoo Questions was a really big thing, or Yahoo Answers, where you go and ask
poll questions? No, I'm too old for
that. Okay.
I don't remember any of that. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Prior to larger Facebook social media platforms, what would happen?
Are you talking MySpace?
Before that.
Oh, before that, MySpace. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, before Tom.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Before that, I would. My mom was a principal, so I'd be at her school a lot, and I go in the teacher's lounge, and I'd be on the computer, and I'd type questions in on Google why can't I get people to like me? And I'd find Yahoo Answers forums and questions where people would be I want to be popular, I can't get people to like me, and there would be articles that you could click, or people would link it, be here are things you could do to make people like you, and they'd be dress like this, or talk like this, or be interesting in this way, and I literally printed out these 16-page list articles of here's what you do to be popular, and try to go do it and fall flat on my face every time. I dress like this, be like this, do this, try this. And it didn't work out. And it didn't work out for me so many times that the
only answer you felt was suicide.
Yeah, it's there's no reason for you to be here. The thing that I walked away from the entire experience with was this idea that, if you're trying to do all of these things and it's very clear that you can't do it, it's very clear that you don't have the capacity to do that, then maybe you just shouldn't be here. Maybe there was a little glitch.
So insignificance.
Yeah.
So when you get at this impasse of insignificance and you're looking at it as far as suicide prevention, what helped to get you through that, and as far as in that space, and being in as far as urban culture, how do you see suicide prevention on a scale, as a scalable thing that can be distributed on a broader scale to get more people to interact with mental health?
I think that suicide prevention and mental health kind of awareness are two really big things. I think that my experience with them, the two things that were most important for me were, number one, that my parents got me in therapy. I don't feel that I understood how important it was at the time, but for my parents to get me in therapy with a Black therapist that kind of had an understanding of
identifies your culture and where you're coming from.
Yeah, that understands those experiences a bit more was something that was really important for me. But also, what I say is that in a time when I didn't feel like my life had value, comics, anime, manga were very big and significant things for me. Not just in the context of using them as escape. So when Borders was a thing, My parents, we go to the mall, or I get dropped off at the mall, and I go in Borders and sit in the manga section. It's like I'm a kid. I can't buy anything, but I'm just gonna sit and read all of these and read all of these manga. And when you talk about mental health and you look at shonen manga in particular, when you make a juxtaposition between the two, most of the time in shonen manga, the way that I describe it is that you have a character with an audacious goal that they feel profoundly unequipped to attain. So I want to be the world's greatest ninja, but I don't know how to control my chakra. Like that's Naruto. I want to be the world's greatest hero, but I don't have any powers. It's My Hero Academia. Or like this idea of I wanna, but I can't. That context and that kind of trope was something that I identified with a lot.
So I have a question for you there. So then did your therapist, in addition with that, help you through that with understanding those different types of, I have this goal and I can't achieve it, or this is what I can do with that? Like how did he help get you through there? Or like how
so
would you go about
for that? In specifics, I think that for my therapist, it was the fact that I had a person to talk to. I remember one time I finished an appointment and my therapist literally said, like he talked to my dad, and he said he just needed to talk. He would have talked for 2 hours if I let him. Because so often when you feel like you're alienated and you feel disconnected from people, you don't have that opportunity to get your voice out. You don't have that opportunity to feel heard. And I think that what therapy did for me that was most potent and that was most impactful was the fact that it gave me that opportunity. That opportunity to talk, to share my voice, and to be validated in the sense that, hey, what you're feeling and what you're going through are totally normal. You're normal. You're okay. I think therapy for me normalized the fact that everybody has difficulties when it comes to growing into who they are and coming into their own. And understanding that it was normal and having somebody to talk through that with had a profound impact on me. And then you look at these stories, these like great epics that span for such a long period of time. Like One Piece has been around and been running for longer than I've been alive. So when you think about it in that context, it's this idea that you see these characters that have these goals, and when they can't accomplish these goals, they train and they try, and sometimes they succeed, and when they don't, they go train some more and they try again, and they get help from their friends. They learn more about their abilities and what they're capable of, and they leverage that in order to get to where they want to go. And I think that cadence also was impactful for me, because what it showed me was this idea that you can keep going. It doesn't have to, you don't have to stop where you are. Where you are today does not have to be the place where you end. And it's through that perseverance that you find strength. And I think that was really helpful for me.
So two things that I really want to touch on that, because I'm a little bit older. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but culturally, like, people talk about mental illness and mental health and getting help and that, but culturally, as wanting to be a person and a strong black man, it was completely frowned upon to be like, oh, go get some help, go get some psychiatric evaluation. It's just like, it just was not like the type of thing, because you were thought of as being weak and someone who couldn't provide your family or couldn't take care of things, and that. So it was really like, basically like the black man code was like, show no sign of weakness. So all of a sudden I feel like it's culturally, it's just like kind of turning the curve of being that kind of acceptance where you can go get help. But then, I hear a lot of people talk about that, and why I was really curious about your perspective is because a lot of people can't afford, like in the inner city community, like mental health, like therapy, because it's expensive. They don't have the access, and then they don't have necessarily the type of therapist who like even can understand or identify their type of problems, because they're not living that person's inner city life. And so I wanted to hear from you specifically, because I think hearing that for other people will really like put that into perspective of like, okay, here's what you did, here's how I can do it, here's how I can help myself, here's how I can help others.
Yeah, I think that the black community in particular is really just turning the corner around mental health and it being acceptable to talk about it. I think that it's something that's applied a lot to adults. Like I know a lot of adults that are I go to a therapist. I talk to a therapist. I have a therapist.
That's half of LA.
But I think that for kids, for young people, we're not there yet, right? Especially if this idea that like your kid comes to you and says that they're depressed, and like I feel like a stereotypical black parent response would probably be like, "What are you depressed about?"
Or here's your iPad.
Yeah, exactly. Like what do you have to be depressed about? For adults, I feel like we're just getting it. We're just getting there. So for kids, that resonance isn't quite there yet. But also for black men in particular, I think that even though there's been a lot of growth, we still don't allow ourselves to feel pain and process our emotions in the way that we should.
Well, I have that problem sometimes.
Like just for healthy mental health overall. And a lot of people want to point fingers and say, well, the black man isn't allowed to, the black man's not allowed to. But for me, the people that make me feel that way the most are other black men. It's other black dudes. Other black dudes are the ones that are like, young man, you can't be out here doing that. You can't behave this way. So, for example,
you gotta take care of your business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I love the color pink. Like the color pink is one of my favorite colors, and I have outfits that I wear that are like very heavy and big on pink. And I wear a cape too, right? So imagine me like in a hot pink shirt and a cape with a matching tie, and I go to an event. I get invited to an event to speak. Everybody's like, wow, I loved your talk. I love your talk. Only person that has anything negative to say to me is a black man in the audience that's like, young man, I appreciated your speech and I appreciated the message that you have for the youth, but you really got to think about the way that you're dressing out here and the way they look at us.
Well, what's funny is, and I just wanted to talk about that, is Lil Nas X, when he was at the Grammys, there was some rapper who came out about that. It was talking about how he wouldn't let his son go out, like that. So it's just like, it's still like, people are like, oh, we're coming this corner, but then it's still right there. So,
and I think Lil Nas X is an interesting example because he showed up in that pink outfit and like did amazing. And even though someone's always going to have something negative to say. In general, there were a lot of people supporting him. I'd wager that if Lil Nas X wasn't as famous as he was, the same people on Twitter that were supporting him would have been roasting him. Like once you reach a certain level of fame or notoriety, you're allowed to do what you want. But before you have that, the minute you do something that can be deemed as different or can it be deemed as weird, you're crazy. It's like, what is that guy doing? What does he have on? And I would love if we afforded that freedom of expression to everybody, no matter where they are in their journey.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one. Keyboard warriors it's a different kind of scenario. Yeah. I think the next thing I really wanted to talk to you about is talk about like comics. You were talking about like your different comics and continuing like having set up and created the Uncommons. So I wanted you to tell me a little bit about that, because you've created this platform within that to show people narratives within the world and how to navigate stuff and how to do positive things and maybe actually show their power beyond just what they're seeing as for the superpower. It's like not in the way that like you can be stronger or lift something heavy or have laser eye rays, but just like there's a superpower, like a subtle superpower, I guess. Like I know that, like with some of the characters you've created.
The Uncommons for me represents the sort of comics and storytelling that I wish I had growing up.
Okay.
So the comic, when we talk about it, like when we talk about it, we say the Uncommons is about a group of unlikely outsiders that bands together when one of them predicts the end of the world. So we have our main character, Iris, that has these enhanced visual abilities, and what Iris's abilities say are that she can see energies, details, and outcomes. So she can track people's moods and things like that based on really, really minute things that their body does. If there's an object coming towards her, she can track what trajectory it's moving at so that she knows if she needs to move out of the way. Iris has this perspective, like through her eyes, that allow her to see a bunch of information that a lot of people can't see. But one day, Iris has a vision.
So is it kind of like someone like you're like, I just want to get it so that people can understand, like the Matrix, where people can like read the Matrix and they can see the picture, but then like to everyone else it's just a bunch of numbers on the screen. Like she's kind of got like that kind of
if I had to make a direct correlation, then her power would be closer to like the Sharingan from Naruto, where like because you're great. The weebs will get it. The weebs will get it. They'll know.
Okay,
They'll get what I'm saying.
All right.
Iris has these abilities that allow her to pick up a lot of information that other people normally can't. Things that you can't see with the naked eye. But generally, her eyes don't show her the future until one day they do. And the future that she sees is one where the world is in flames. There's massive calamity. Major city structures are demolished and destroyed. There are flames everywhere. And she's like, wait, what?
So she's like the Black Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Mari Copani is the Black Greta. Or actually, no, that's disrespectful because Mari was doing it a bit earlier. Dang, my brain got disconnected.
Side note, it's all good. Let's bring it back to the uncommons. Bring it back to the uncommons. It's
cool.
There.
So, The Uncommons tells a story of a group of hesitant heroes that band together when one of them predicts the end of the world. Our main character, Iris, has this vision where she predicts this major calamity, but she has no idea what it is or where it's coming from. So what she does is she decides, well, I need to do something about it. And her first thought is, well, I'm going to go tell the leaders of my tribe and maybe they'll be able to do something. But instead, what she's told is, you're a child. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like, go on somewhere, pretty much. But she feels such conviction about what she saw that she leaves her home country and goes to the scene of her vision, this futuristic metropolis called Delta City, and starts to build a team of people in order to combat this evil that even they don't quite understand. So of the Uncommons, we have 5 characters. Iris, who's our leader of the group. Influencer, who, as his name dictates, like, is a social media influencer. What we say about influencers is that he has influencer has millions of fans, but he's not a fan of himself. His power is called Hero's Will, and he essentially gets increased speed, strength, and durability based on personal resolve. But his self-esteem is terrible, which is a part of why he's a social media influencer. He just gets validation from outside to power himself up instead of doing the personal work of of trying to build himself up.
Inner substance.
We have a character named Echo who has enhanced hearing, so he has an ability called Earshot. You can hear things in an enhanced radius, and another ability called Encore that lets him copy noises that he's heard. Our 4th member of the group is named Chikara, and what I'll say about Chikara is that her name means power in Japanese, and that's pretty much all you need to know. Of all the people in the group, that I wouldn't try her. It's not the person I mess with. Wouldn't do it. And lastly, we have Sage, who comes around a little towards the end of the first arc. But we released the comic online. And we put out 1 issue a month. And really the idea with the story, kind of is what you said from the meta themes that you noticed, is what does a millennial or Gen Z comic look like? Like what stories need to be told that young people would identify with beyond the basic concept of, oh, I have amazing abilities? What struggles would characters need to persevere through or need to evolve through that are also directly on par with what young people are experiencing today? Like when
you know who actually had a really interesting narrative on that, and I was just watching another show, a podcast called All the Smoke, and it was just a recent retrospective on Kobe Bryant, and he was talking about how he was looking at creating stories and fairy tales of modern days with reality, so he had stories to tell his daughters of how to persevere in a nowadays modern age of how to work through problems and what happens, rather than just the whole, like, you know, the knight in the castle and the fairy tale, and he comes and gets the princess and they go wander away and live happily ever after. He was like telling real stories, working on really telling real stories with his production company. So that's one of the parallels I see between the kind of storytelling you're doing and like Kobe, and like it's just something interesting I was thinking about when I was just prepping for this podcast. It's just a really thing that you should go check out.
I think there are a lot of people that I've heard that have like similar concepts where like people, especially celebrities, they're like, they have a child, and after they have their child, they're like, whoa, the stories and media content available for my child are like very slim pickings. So I need to develop something or make something so that they'll have something to aspire to, so they'll be able to see something. And I think stuff like that is really powerful, and it has a chance to be important. Or I think it's really important, and it has a chance to be really powerful. But what happens a lot of the time is that people feel, I'm going to create this story, I'm going to tell this story, and the way that they tell it is like very heavy-handed. Like they don't let the story tell itself. Instead, it becomes like this really big political statement about the specific thing that they want to talk about, and it doesn't resonate as much. So with the Uncommons, our goal was to tell a story that we felt was representative of itself and the themes that we wanted it to encompass, but without having to be really heavy-handed about it. And I think we managed to balance that really well.
Okay, because another thing that you really brought up that I thought was super interesting was how you go about dealing with systematic alienation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with the comics and kind of like not people having stories for themselves, I wanted to talk about the work that you're doing there and how that is kind of like combats that.
So comics are really important to me. I think that comics are really powerful. I think they have the potential to create a lot of change. And when we developed the Uncommons, the idea was, what if we developed a comic that created impact both on the page and off the page? Okay. Because even though comics can be very powerful, I think people overestimate their power sometimes. In the context that someone may say, wow, police brutality is a really big issue. Criminal reform is something that we need to think about. There are a lot of social justice related issues in the world that we need to think about. And their idea will be, well, I'm going to make a comic, and my comic is going to help because representation matters. And all of that is like very important. It's very true. But some people have this idea that, hey, I'm going to make one 22-page comic, and all I need to do is get people to read my comic. And if they read my comic, then suddenly all the problems are going to go away because representation matters. Like if I personally go and add my story and I do my thing that makes me feel good, suddenly centuries of injustice in the systems that allow them to take place are just going to melt. Because these 22 pages that I developed are so amazing. They're so great. And I don't want to be a downer, but I don't particularly think that's the case. I think that we overestimate the impact that we're able to have in those cases. So it's important that we build something that allows that impact to take place in a measurable way. Like when Black Panther came out, there were a bunch of people that were like, representation matters, representation matters, representation matters. And that's true, it's cool. But what made it work was the fact that in addition to the movie, we got literacy campaigns and STEM programs being made based on Wakanda. Like there were ancillary activities that were happening in addition to the film that allowed it to work. Like Black Panther was more than a movie. It was a movement. It was a whole like experience.
Well, it just got people super interested in the culture, black and white, you know, just like the whole scenes and the costumes and just the languages and the principles. Yeah. And it's just like, you know, like it delves into religion and spirituality. Like there's just a lot going on with family. Yeah. So I think it touches on a lot of that. It was just done in, you know, a very Black Panther way. Yeah. So I think that's interesting in that regard. And as far as going into the whole media and seeing how media distributes things, I think it's really interesting to dive into what you're talking about as far as a media literacy program.
Yeah, I think my core understanding was this. I created the Uncommons and I was very happy with what I made. But if I was being completely honest with myself, what I knew was that when we talk about Nazir and that experience that I had with Nazir, I can't wholeheartedly say that just because Nazir read my one comic, that suddenly all the other experiences of alienation and negative media images that he dealt with would just go away. Yeah. Like, I don't think that the negative impact that those things had would disappear just because he picked up one comic. Even if he picked up 5 comics, I'm not sure.
Starts to crack the seal.
Yeah, like it does a little bit, but I don't necessarily think that it is the end-all be-all solution. But what I do think is possible is if we use the comic that he's already reading as a conduit for him to get into things that can have that impact. So the average American student engages with media content about 10 and a half hours a day.
But do they know what they're seeing or watching?
Probably not. Which is the point, right? Like kids are inundated with more media than ever before, but our education system currently, as it stands, does not give them the context that's necessary to parse through those images.
To decipher it.
So Stanford did a study that said that majority of the students that they work with for the purpose of this study couldn't distinguish the difference between real news content and sponsored content. So even when it literally says sponsored content in red letters or hashtag ad or hashtag sponsor, they still legitimately didn't know if something that they were reading or engaging with was a real piece of media or if it was something that someone paid for.
And created, like for their own narrative.
Exactly. So for us, our thought was, what if we took the comic that young people were already reading and we were able to partner it with lesson plans, with curricula, with projects that can be used by teachers, parents, after school counselors, and things like that in classrooms around the country.
Okay.
So it's this idea that what starts as a comic that young people are reading also has the capability to be something that's used to empower them, that's used to teach them media literacy, that's used to teach them digital literacy, that's used to get some of that social emotional learning, the emotional piece that we talked about earlier in place. And I think that kind of ecosystem is what makes me really proud of my work, because I don't think people are looking at it from that macro of a level. And I think that the two tangible sides of what we do, where we're creating comics and we're pioneering diverse representation, but we're simultaneously working with educators and developing educational materials and curricula, I think those two pieces of the puzzle are what create the impact that we want to have.
Okay, so how do people reach that? What's the website? Where do they go? How do they go about finding these things?
Yeah, so our comic is at weirdenough.com.
Okay.
We're also on Webtoons at Weird Enough Productions. And for teachers, educators, our program is called Get Media Lit, and that's at getmedialit.com.
Okay, and that's nationwide.
Nationwide. We're working in schools around the country. I'm really excited about the impact that we're seeing in the schools that we're working with. And the goal is to take it global. So I'm excited.
Nice. I mean, I really love hearing about you creating a positive change and creating an education platform, because my mom is a teacher and yours is a principal. So it's just like, something that's meaningful to both of us. But the last thing I want to do is let's hear about the work that you're doing with the LA Crete Academy.
Yeah, so Crete Academy is a really amazing institution. They're based in Inglewood. And they're a charter school specifically for homeless students. So Crete was one of the first schools that we had the privilege to work with. They were really proactive in allowing us to pilot the program and work with their students. And now as we kind of scale out what the program looks like in practice, where students aren't just engaging with stories, they're creating stories and telling their own stories. Crete is the first school that we're working with on that. And have the ability to bring that level of developing your personal narrative to students that are experiencing homelessness, I think is really important, because they don't have agency in a lot of the traditional ways that young people may. So giving them the opportunity to get that back and to take that control, I think is something that's really impactful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Tony. I really appreciate you joining us here on the socialstudiesshow.com. It's been a great show. It's been very enlightening, and man, I can't talk enough about all the positive work that you're doing. I'm just so glad you came on the show, and appreciate you, man.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. You got an opinion? We'd love to hear it. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe to the Social Studies Show on our YouTube channel.